Hello, everyone. Welcome to Map Control CS. I'm your host, Dream, joined once again by Yumi. Obviously, you'll see our lovely webcams on right there. That's me and Yumi just holding a still pose, as we do. How you doing?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I feel like my face is starting to hurt. Might need to move and or breathe. That's
Yeah, unfortunately, we did have some technical difficulties. The program we used to get our webcams on the stream didn't work, and Yumi was trying to put viruses on our computer with other programs, so we decided just to use the
you went to
photos.
me for solutions, and I tried to find solutions. It just didn't work.
You keep quiet, all right? You failed. We'll accept that. Obviously, though, thank you everyone for joining us throughout the year. And by throughout the year, I mean for the last month, obviously. This will be our end of year review, but we will start off with a few news bits that have come in the past, well, I want to say week. Obviously, yeah, about a week. So obviously, we've had the end of the ESEA season now, which means it's perfect time for a good roster change. I mean, we love a roster change, don't we?
Wait, like the UK scene, or do we actually? I hate roster changes personally.
Right. Since we'll end the show, cut this stream.
It happened. No, but yeah, you're exactly right. Like it happens every season, right? Like yeah, you play a season with one player, you just don't mesh, or somebody underperforms, or some other issue crops up that isn't even related to Counter-Strike, and someone has to go. Like there's so many reasons that can kind of crop. I don't think that's really like the latter reasons I just gave. I don't think are any of the ones listed for what we're about to.
Yeah, so obviously roster changes have come in at the end of the season. It's expected with any UK scene, but the changes that have come in, we're going to start with Fierce. Obviously, in the previous show, we talked about the fact that Saiki and Tatong have been removed thanks to Fierce, who gave us a good statement talking about the reasons for that and why they just basically said that the team made the decision. We're just going to support behind them. So obviously, Swaggy and Tatong have been removed. The first player to be re-added coming up on your screen, obviously, will show won't show the video, but it will show you the tweet. Is K-Piz being re-added back into the roster for Fierce? What do you think about that, Yumi?
I definitely thought it was a bit strange when they got rid of K-Piz, considering I think like from watching their sort of documentary series that they do, which is phenomenal, and like I actually love the fact that the org is doing. But from watching that, it seemed like K-Piz was the one that kind of pulled the deal together between these players and the organization. So it always seemed a bit odd for him to be the one that left first. With that said, I think with Totung's like successes in the minor qualifiers and the qualifiers that he participated in with the team, it definitely seemed like the move made sense in their eyes. Just because it didn't seem like they were happy with their in-game leading, or maybe there seemed to be some inner conflict between one or more of the players, and K-Piz may have been involved in that. I don't know. From watching even just the video, it seemed like the passions of the players was very, very different. Like K-Piz is very noticeably angry in certain moments, and the rest of the team just kind of be like, "Whoa, what is going on?" But that could also just be his experience and being frustrated that they've lost or not performed to how he expects at that point in their careers.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right. And it could also just be the reason that you stated, something just wasn't going right. Obviously, like you said, the passions were different in the videos. Doesn't mean that no one is passionate. It's a lot of players will experience, we'll call them moments of anger when you get up and do whatever K-Piz did, which is get very angry at the situation. But if you play at a certain level, and if you start playing in the UK scene or any scene for that fact, you play against certain players, you get to know those players, you get to know who you should be beating. And I think in certain cases, players like K-Piz, obviously they know who they should be beating. They know they shouldn't be losing maps to certain teams. That stuff can boil over quite easily. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you don't let it get into your game. From what I understood, it's that K-Piz is removed because they wanted to get a dedicated IGL in. Obviously, Tatong had, the team in general had a fantastic showing in the minor qualifier. What I learned as well from K-Piz, what I learned from K-Piz as well was that it wasn't actually him in-game leading fully. I believe it was, I want to say F-Sound or Emin was helping. Like, they were basically switching between.
Yes, yeah, I'd heard kind of similar things as well. You say that, it's just like fully reminded me. But like, when we watched Fierce play as well, like after they added Totung, like he had those pretty good performances when he first came in. but it seemed like towards like the end or like the past kind of month, he hasn't really been putting up numbers for the side, as far as I'm aware. It seemed like Capiz was always someone that fragged for the team, and I feel like they were missing that firepower in a way. It also makes sense that both Totang and Swaggy have left together, considering they seem to be quite good friends and they've played on teams together before, right? So
yeah, I think it's a real shame that Swaggy's one left or whatever happened in that situation. I think Swaggy is a very competent AWPer. He's someone that seemed to work well with the Fierce team when they were doing well. He can hit his shots with the AWP. He had great showings in the WSG when they were playing against the G2s, the Vitalities. It just seemed like, again, it comes down to those relationships. And if you feel like you've just added this person, I can understand where he's coming from. You know, we can't just remove yet. Let's give it to the end of the season, see what happens then. But sometimes these teams need to make the decisions. And obviously losing Capiz was a bit of a fragging power gone from that team. Totong wasn't able to make that up. The decisions are all there. You can see the reasons for it. It's unfortunate that it's just come to this.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is hard though, like because I like Swaggy quite a lot as a player. Like I've watched him since I've started casting. Basically, he's been there. And it is a shame, but I think there are certainly a lot of rounds that you can kind of reflect on, like obviously looking back, right? But you can look at the demo at certain points and just be like, why has he done that? Or why has he peaked or done or like made a push at a certain time that makes like some sense, but it just didn't make sense in the grand scheme of like the round, right? And I think like you do that enough times, people start to notice. People are going to be there is going to be some inner conflicts as a result of that, and I do hope that he can find a team that gives him like full freedom to do what he wants, but they create like a support structure around that, right?
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. And I think the reason for getting someone like Totong in maybe is that can help the likes of Swaggy's decision making. And obviously, I think what Swaggy really needs is just more experience at the top of that level. Obviously, it's a shame it doesn't seem like he'll be playing advanced with Fierce next season, obviously due to the roster changes that we've seen come in. And that's another thing I want to get onto was that Fierce have actually able to secure themselves a spot in Advanced, I believe Revelation, and I think CX will be in Advanced next season. So it looks like we're getting back to the olden days when every single UK team seemed to be an ESEA main.
Not like this, man. It's happening.
It's happening. We're going backwards, you mean?
I don't know. The addition of Advanced was always going to be a bit of it's hit or miss, right? And I guess they sometimes miss.
I knew you were going to do it as soon as the first thing that came to my head.
I feel gross just saying it.
You should. You really should. I'm going to move on from there. I'm going to get a new host in as well after this. Just give me a couple minutes to see if I can get anyone else in instead of Yuumi. No, he's made TikTok references. No, I'd hate to lose you, Yuumi. You're my rock that keeps me from I was going to say ending it all, but I think that's a bit too far. We'll move on now to the second roster change and the second most, well, probably the most important roster change that we've seen in recent times. It seems that Christmas has come early for us who love a good roster change, as Link and Stanley were removed from London Esports, with two new players being announced. That is Frey and Ardis.
I am very surprised to see Frey in there. I mean, he's definitely got like it's a really nice looking team now. He was a good looking team before, right? I think Frey seemed a little bit elusive. Like I actually haven't watched too much of Frey. But every time I have watched him, he's had a play that has been, I want to say game winning, but it's just like such a ridiculous play at the time. They're just like, oh, okay, I guess that's just him. Like, being him, you know. I the only reason it like sticks out in my mind is because he has a stupid name on Faceit.
I'm trying to remember what it is now.
It is Megadongs.
That's it. It's brilliant.
Every time I think about it, it just makes me sad because I don't want to say Megadongs 50 times in a stream, you know. But he's a really good player, and so is Ardis. Ardis, particularly in the Omen UK League, he stood in for 2 or 3 teams, I think, or it might have just been 2. And he played really well in like almost every game. So
Yeah, everyone I've talked to said, "Oh, he's a very competent player. He knows what he's doing. Seems to be able to frag very well." But what this does mean with Ardis, obviously, joining this roster now, that means that he will be departing the endpoint roster. They've been played by its roster changes for played. They've had a pretty stable roster. It seems like they've had a sort of a rotating fifth where they have to keep getting a new player in. It's been Shiki, it's been Robin. Now it was obviously Ardis. It's a shame to see him go for Endpoint. Obviously, that would be another team who's actually in advance after being relegated for MDL. A pretty poor MDL season in general for Endpoint. Not in terms of how they played. Obviously, it's just how many games they were able to win. It was pretty much every game they played was overtime, 16-14 losses. But at the end of the day, it comes down to winning, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you don't win anything, then you have to make changes at some point. Especially it depends entirely what the org wants, right, and what your players want, and what kind of time frame you create for that goal. I think as well with the London roster, I think coming into this lineup, there were always some question marks about some of the players, because I think there had been sort of intermittent motivation issues that had occurred in the past, and so nobody really knew if that was going to carry forward. And I guess I still don't know whether that played a part in the London move, but it's definitely a welcome change, and it looks. I'm excited to see whether they're able to kind of pull things through, because they've got some ridiculous firepower.
Yeah, I think this is certainly an upgrade in terms of pure firepower. Obviously, Frey has experience and history with Stiffmeister and obviously London now. He played with them when they were Wind and Rain and MDL. Obviously, again, Ardis just pure firepower. It seems he's had a good time on Endpoint, seems to be doing well. It's a shame to say goodbye to the likes of Lincoln Stanley. Obviously, Stanley's had a pretty poor couple of years, not necessarily personally, but as in he's not had a great time on certain teams, seems to be getting removed or having to leave. Not great setups in certain cases, obviously Link as well. I was quite surprised to see Link go. Stanley tweeted a couple of days ago that he'd been benched basically, which wasn't too surprising for me. Personally, his individual stance in some teams hasn't been the best in terms of pure firepower. But, London clearly have plans for their future, and I think this is the changes that they've made to try and keep out the longevity of this roster.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think I have anything really to.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the next thing now, which is our final topic before we move into our proper end of year review. This is obviously just getting all the recent news out of the way, and this is the drama with the Climber Cup. Now, this was a very surprising issue to me because I had no idea this was going on, quite frankly, until Mighty Max has tweeted about this. There was a tweet thread that should be coming up, hopefully, with Mighty Max's tweets. This is a very odd situation. It seems so poorly planned in general. But I'll just go through the details. I'm just trying to get Mighty Max's tweets up quickly. Yeah, so I'll just read out his first tweet, the initial one that came out. Shout out to the parties involved at ESL and at ESEA for the Climber Cup. Not only have we had to play our LAN finals online to accommodate the qualifier for MDL relegations due to the qualifier being added at the end of the season without any announcement to British domestic EPS, we were then kept in the dark entirely, only knowing that the date for this Climber Cup was set for the 17th of December. No format, no times. We then found out 2 days prior to the start the date is changed to the 22nd and 23rd of December. This just seems like a very odd situation. Quite frankly, it just makes the LAN in the January obsolete, surely, at this point.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea what's going on. We've always understood that ESL and ESEA are like, they're the same company, but they're separate entities. And it just seems like they didn't schedule with one another properly. I don't know, man. Recently, I've really come to understand that a lot of things in esports are very last minute and very kind of open-ended, especially because it's like the online flexibility of everything. Organizers or players will just be like, hey, you can just reschedule it, right? Like you have nothing going on that day anyway, you know. Yeah, it's like, it's very naive to think that these people don't have plans. And sometimes the fact that people do have plans just means that they can't play a game, and then suddenly you need to stand in. It's not even your fault as a player, right? So
Yeah,
I don't know. The whole thing makes me a little bit.
it makes me generally just confused. I spent a good 20-30 minutes just reading tweets and just understanding what's really happened here. It seems the ESL UK team, which is a domestic team that obviously deals with the EPS, etc. It seems like they had no idea this was going to happen as well. It doesn't look like EPS. I think so. Basically, what's happened is EPS now has there's been a qualifier introduced for MDL relegation, which has become known as the Climber Cup, I assume. They are going to still have the LAN finals because the talent was only announced 2 days ago. So 2 or 3 days ago at least.
Yeah.
It's really, in general, just seems a poorly executed, poorly decided situation, poorly scheduled. It doesn't seem like anything has gone into this properly. They haven't thought about anything properly. They've mucked up a little bit with the team schedules. This is 2 days before Christmas. People are leaving to go home, go on their holidays. Just because they play games professionally or whatever doesn't mean that they are not going to have problems around Christmas. Exactly. Yeah. It's absolutely ridiculous.
But like that's the thing. It's just like naivety that something's not going to go wrong with scheduling. And also, I mean, you say like they didn't put much thought into it. I imagine they're putting a lot of thought into it now, but it's kind of like you've invested or committed to the ideas earlier on that it's right. You suddenly contradict yourself, and then I don't know, man. It's hard for us as well because like we can't criticize it fully because we don't understand both sides of it, right? Like we only see what is publicly available via Mighty Max and like what's going on currently in terms of tournaments. Like we don't know what the situation is with the organization, but from the outside looking in, it's just confusing.
At the very least, it seems to have come as an announcement that it is too late. This is announced at the end of the season. It just none of it really makes sense. I think we'll probably just leave it there because I think we've made the point that it's just confusing situation. We do hope it's all resolved. However, it's a bit of shame. It's a shame really to make the LAN practically redundant. I assume it's for prize pool still. There's still a decent amount of prize pool on offer. However, the big thing for teams there was to qualify for MDL via it. But even then, I don't think they're guaranteed anymore. I think they still have to play European teams in the relegation zone. But we will move on. And obviously, we do go to our end of year wrap up. This is I think something necessary, especially how we haven't been around for the entire year, to have a look back at some of the topics and some of the interesting storylines that came out of 2017, moving into 2018, and now moving into 2019. And I will start with Gfinity Elite Series. Now, some may remember this in 2017. It gave UK teams a very good chance to earn money, be salaried, kept on location. It's kind of like if you watch League or anything like that, like the LCS, obviously on a much lower scale for much lower teams in terms of ranking, but it was a real stable environment for some of these UK teams, especially for organizations. It gave them a reason to have UK teams.
Yeah, especially if like when you have a league that is purely controlled and you understand exactly what the target audience is, that's like those are some things immediately checked off at the marketing list, right? Like teams are all about marketing. It's about like creating opportunities for your sponsors and getting those players into positions where your team is synonymous with winning or being one of the best teams in the UK. That being gone is, I mean, it's somewhat hurtful.
Yeah, I mean, it's upsetting. It's really was something for a lot of these teams to aim for to possibly get into Gfinity. So Gfinity in 2017, obviously it does gap into the point in 2018. Please bear with me. Obviously in the first season, we saw Epsilon win it, and that was at the time that Smuya was on Epsilon. And then it was Epsilon to win it, and the only UK team to place in the top 4 to get that prize pool was Excel when they had the team as well. We move into the second season, which saw Envious Academy when they had their academy team. They managed to take the win, Endpoint finishing 4th. Epsilon finished 2nd, but at that time, I believe they moved to the full Swedish roster, if you remember that stint, after they got rid of the European mixed team and they moved to like Jzar and all them. But at the end of 2017, there was rumors going around that Gfinity would not be returning to CSGO, which is a real shame because I enjoyed watching the Gfinity tournaments, the league in general. It's really fun to see these UK players having, a bit of fun at LAN, getting on with each other, and really just getting to play against some some good European opposition. We'll say that. However, it was confirmed later on that Gfinity will be exiting CSGO. That came at the start of 2018 as they moved into their season 3. Basically, that's caused a groundswell of organizations to move out of UK CSGO. Some of the top organizations that we had at the time. The only remaining UK roster that is available at the moment that I could find anything for is Endpoint. They're the only one who still has a team. The rest of the orgs that played in Gfinity do not have an organization that anymore, or do not have a CSGO team in their organization. Infused, Excel, and Method, all that fielded top UK teams, left. Reason Gaming left after the first season and went to get his Danish team, and then they exited CSGO completely as well, which is a real shame because that was a pretty upsetting way to start 2018.
Yeah, and them being purchased by who they own by now? I think Civo or sorry, I don't even know who owns Gfinity anymore. In all,
Gfinity work with Civo to do the Civo League.
Yes,
but
they run.
Yeah, that's it, pretty much.
Yeah. They run their own Counter-Strike league, but it's kind of it's all online as far as I'm aware as well. And
yes,
the prize pool is decent, but it's just very strange things. There were a couple things that I wanted to kind of touch on that I kind of forgot to cut you off before we did the recap. Sorry, it's my own fault. When we were talking about like organization and everything, the fact that ESL and FACEIT are actually working together for this year's cycle of events is super, super cool. And also that there is a team kind of kicking around that has the potential to be very, very interesting.
Are you talking about Fraser's team?
Yes.
I meant to mention it.
It's one of those things that it's like it's a load of players that like haven't played with each other at least lately, but they've got a lot of kind of experience. And I mean, if you just look at some of the players, it's like they can either do really, really well off the bat or just completely bottom out, just because they might not mesh together,
Yeah, I think they will do. This is basically the mix of the XNX guys. They've got a spot in advance and another team. It looks like a very competent roster. It's one of those rosters again that on paper looks very good. Obviously, Adam, Fraser, Craig, Jackie, and King Mezzi. That looks like a good roster to me. It looks like a roster that could possibly bridge the gap that we have in the scene at the moment, where it's pretty much 2 top teams and then everyone else at this point. I wish the likes of Fraser. He's pretty shafted off CX. I thought that was unfair in my personal opinion. I thought he was a good player.
Yeah, the timing was awful, right? It's just
yeah. I do also want to personally apologize to Fraser. He's been very upset at me on this.
Yeah, he sent me like a very aggressive DM, and I was just like, to be fair, we probably should have mentioned it.
We should have. I was so rushing this afternoon. I don't wake up in the morning. This afternoon to get this done. That I completely forgot about his team. However, that is a serious team to look forward to going into the next season. It is completely my bad that we forgot about them. Certainly, I mean, it'd be a shame to underlook them, and they deserve to have a statement in... they're also looking for an organization. So any team that really wants a good, decent team that could have some success at a European level, certainly pick up that roster.
Wow, we went that far with that. I didn't realize.
I don't want him to unfollow me, man. I need his follow. It gives me clout.
Okay, I respect that. Sorry, we can go back to recapping things now.
Yeah, obviously we just talked about Gfinity. Then we move on to a bit of a positive at the start of this season, start of the year for 2018. ESL announced an increase in its prize pool for EPS and also increased the number of teams allowed to compete. This is definitely, I think they picked up on the support structure that was needed in the UK scene after Gfinity decided to pull out.
Yeah, it definitely creates an opportunity as well for better exposure for more of these teams, right? I think now ESL are kind of, I mean, they have been for the past years, but it'll be the one-stop shop for UKCS. Any team that is like worthy of being there should be there, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's basically how you're able to say that you're able to do, well, you basically say, I've made it to EPS. That is something that organizations may be able to pick you up off of. Obviously, there's quite a decent amount of prize pool in the EPS division itself. But like you said, it's basically, yeah, it gives good UK teams a chance to play against each other at a constant level. Obviously, it promises a LAN at the end, but we'll ignore the Climber Cup drama. It gives you a LAN to play for. I'm not quite sure if you were able to play for MTL yet. I think you may have been able to. So it's certainly a lot of incentive to teams to get into EPS.
Yeah, it's going to be, it should be a really interesting, I mean, it gives like these players the chance to play against players they otherwise might not have been able to kind of get in contact with, just because of a poor season or whatever. There's greater opportunities to improve by playing against people that are better than you, which is a different debate in its own, but you'll certainly be able to learn some things about certain players, and you may see some stock moves up and down in terms of how players perform. So
yeah, certainly it's and there's a major problem that I didn't really put in my notes. Still, the UK scene is, it is still a lot about who you know and not what you know in terms of game, how you can aim. If you're able to get yourself up to a certain level of social standing, you are more likely to be able to make it onto teams. There are still teams out there that will look for you on talent, to have a good main season. It's a bit of a mix. It's got a lot better since when I first got into the UK scene. Players weren't being picked up because this person hates this person's never going to play with this person. And it seems to have gotten a lot better now, but hopefully we still make improvements. We now move on to the announcement of the FACEIT Major. I remember that being announced, and that was just huge. I was so excited to be able to go to that. I bought my tickets almost instantly.
I was working. I was so sad. I couldn't get time off work to go to the
Jesus, man. Why are you so... You sounded so...
I mean, for the exact same reason, you would have instantly snapped up the tickets. I mean, a major in the UK, right? I know that there was a lot of people that weren't happy with the major as a whole, but it's a major in the UK. You don't know how many of these there are going to be,
Yeah, you're exactly right. You never know how much we'll see majors come into the influence later on. Obviously, the good prospect for it is that the chance that we could see a UK player get onto that stage, or at least attend a major, and we saw that with Depth and Smear. Obviously, Depth had a great run on with Complexity at the major. Big not doing too bad as well. I mean, we've always had individuals that can play well. It's now time to sort of try and lift the scene up a little bit. That's what we're trying to do, Yumi. A bit of grassroots work to try and influence those young talents.
Get good, get picked up. That's basically the plan for most teams. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a team kind of rise up and be that leading UK team kind of and break through and win and just prove themselves internationally. I was kind of running around there with my sentence there, but
yeah,
you kind of saw that with I believe the next thing we want to bring up, just the fact that the scene, and there was a little bit of an increase in stock in some of these players in the UK scene for a little while at least.
Yeah, at least we'll say a season. That obviously brings us to the Stiffmeister squad, who managed to make their way into MDL. They had a pretty good first season. They were to beat some notable teams. I believe the likes of VP obviously weren't playing particularly well, but that's still a good feat for the team. The likes of Gambit, flip side, all taken down at the hands of Stiffmeister, who then went on to sign for Wind and Rain. They obviously managed to play 2 seasons under the banner of MDL, and I believe 2 seasons of I want to say 2 seasons of EPS or something like that anyway as well. And this was good to see that likes of Wind and Rain get involved in UK CSGO. And to be fair to them, they kept the roster on. I believe they got them in, I want to say, I think this is sort of February time. And I think they actually kept them till August. So that's a decent amount of time. But again, Stiffmeister, obviously the core of that is now London. Roster changes started to sort of seep into that roster.
Yeah, it's always going to be the case. I hate talking about roster moves in the UK just because every time I think about it, it just makes me sad. The fact that there are so many like teams that have potential and then suddenly for one reason or another they just don't stick together. It doesn't allow for too much growth. I think it hurts the scene every single time where a team will have success for to a point. They start losing some stuff, and then instantly, it's just someone gets the boot.
Yeah, it can't be the first response for teams anymore. And this is again something that when I first started in the scene, casting, going to Epic LAN, etc., was that the first instinct was, okay, this person's annoyed me in game. This person's not playing particularly well at this point. Yeah, let's just get rid of them. That motto does not work. You have again. Get another player in, you have success for a short amount of time, you either get rid of that player or get something else in, rotating your players around, and then eventually after 6 months or a year or whatever, you then go end up and play with the same people again. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and like suddenly the problems that used to crop up are forgotten about, and the cycle continues, right?
Yeah, exactly right. It's a cycle of, okay, I don't want to play with this person anymore. I'll give it a year, kick them out of the roster. We'll form a new team. We'll have a momentary success and we'll just kick the same person. It unfortunately is not going to work. It's not going to elevate you as a team. I understand people making roster changes. I don't think that applies to any of the roster changes we've really talked about today.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
I think the problem is, though, like, you look at some of these like top tier teams, right? They have more incentive to stay together, right? Because they're under contracts. They're being salaried, so their success hinges on them being successful. As like their career rather hinges on them being successful. And in the grassroots side of things, it's almost like you lose nothing by starting another team with one of your friends or someone you play with on another team before, or just any move that makes sense to you at the time. It's almost inconsequential. Whereas what stops people from doing that at the high level is completely different. Everyone's driven by the same thing, and the fact that money is a factor in that. And it's not really a factor for most teams in the UK. It can be very, very difficult to talk some sense into the players, is that if you stay together for long enough and you are committed to it, you will probably improve. Even if you don't like each other, you don't have to like each other. You don't have to work, or you don't have to like who you work with. But if you are successful, you'll get on to some level, or you'll come to an understanding. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, people need to start, if they want to play at a decent level, at least, they're going into a team. Your priority is not to remain. If you are going to a team that's based on friendships, then sure, your team's you want to maintain friendships, but then you can't make hard decisions. You can't sacrifice something or ask someone to, I understand that you're not particularly a support player, but I kind of need you to do this for the team. You can't ask that of a friend. It can be difficult in those situations, and people need to start to sort of realizing that if you want to succeed, you've got to play as a team. You've got to work. You can't just be friends. Being friends doesn't work anymore. It's good to get you started in the scene. It's good if you're going to mix an ESEA or an Epic LAN or something like that. But if you want to compete at the top of the scene, you don't necessarily all have to be friends. But you can't really hate each other either. You just there needs to be a middle ground of, all right, me and this person wouldn't necessarily be friends in real life, but we can play well together on the game.
And it's respect, which we've talked about before. Like, if there's a mutual respect, even if you don't like each other, you'll play well enough, as long as you don't hate each other at the core of everything. Like, I don't like that person's dog, therefore I hate him for life. It's you can find a way to get past it, but that is obviously a concept that may be a bit hard. Just saying it, like nobody, even if they're listening, it may not seep in. So it can fall on deaf ears, but hopefully it changes over time. I think if one of the things we've talked about before is like the support structure isn't really there in the UK scene. I think if that is there as well, and like the org is there to hold people accountable instead of giving them full autonomy, which I think is what most organizations do. They just let the team do whatever. They don't have a team manager. If you have somebody that can hold the players accountable, be like, this person is very conflict oriented, or this person is just fighting for the sake of fighting, that can be very toxic and you should get rid of them. But if it's disagreements inside the game about certain things like positions or communications or whatever, the team manager can be the one that influences things, kind of acting like a coach, but really just seeing how things are and keeping an eye on the team so that nobody forms these cliques that are very, very toxic to team orientation.
Yeah, exactly. However, we will move past this topic now and go on to we'll basically just do sort of a blitz now, because there's a lot to go through here. We won't go into too much details for these particular topics. A couple of them have a few extra details, usually increases in prize pool and certain events, etc., etc. But we move on to now Stanley, obviously. Someone I hadn't really had on my radar as a decent player, went over to Ghost. Obviously, after I realised he went to Ghost, I had a look at him. He seemed like a fairly good player. Had a couple of good seasons. Seemed to have good individual standings. Obviously, we talked about him a little bit earlier in the show. Unfortunately, he was removed from London. Obviously, he was playing on the Ghosts organization, who now field a pretty decent NA team. He moved over. I believe he was playing with the likes of Sub Rosa and Wardell at that time as well. However, the only thing that really came out of that for Stanley was drama on Twitter, basically. I think it was Smooya tweeted that he'd been treated absolutely poorly, hadn't been given the setup that was needed to play at a decent level, especially an NA Pro League level or an NA MDL level at least. Which is unfair. So what I initially thought was happened, that he was forced to play basically in a hotel room, but other people said that he was forced to play at a teammate's house. I'm not quite sure. Whatever it was that the support there was not good enough for getting a player over and then basically treating him as bad as that.
Yeah, I think in summary, it was something to do with like he was going to stay at a player's house, then they removed that player, and then suddenly had nowhere to stay, and he was playing in a hotel on like his bed in pillows. It's very horribly organized, very horribly thought out. I feel for him, but hopefully, like you said, not really making international limelight. He's definitely still on the radar for a lot of people. So
yeah, certainly, I think he can make an impact in a lot of teams. Maybe not necessarily either Endpoint or London at this point, but I could certainly see him on a team just below that, a CX or something like that. Obviously, he may require a salary, which could be difficult for some teams. But we will move on now to the first LAN of the year, the first Epic LAN of the year. That is Epic LAN 23. This is my second ever Epic LAN. I think I did one in October as well in 2017. So this was an interesting event. Basically, the outcomes were concluded when you went into the event. You knew it was going to be Bulldog, the Bulldog mix, which was Surreal, and the likes of that, versus the Smooya mix. That was always going to be the final. That was always going to be the ending to this story, basically.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair to say. They're the most high-profile players on those teams. They have a certain clout about them, but it is certainly a little bit deserved. They just own, like, they're really good players.
Basically, Fish 123 won that. It was a close best of 5, obviously, at Epic LANs. They use upper bracket, lower bracket, upper bracket. If you're able to get through the final, you get a 1-map advantage. Fish 123 had that, and they were able to move on to bigger and better things, all those players. Obviously, then in March, we got the announcement of the HP Omen UK division, which, if people remember, was it was a tournament which was the individual qualifiers to qualify for it. and also a caster competition. Yumi, do you know anything about casting competitions?
Damn it.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. Basically kickstarted my whole casting thing. So
thing. I love how you didn't use the word career.
It's not quite a career, but it's a thing for now.
It's just a thing that's there. Obviously, that was announced that they had qualifiers that lasted up to 6 months. We knew then at the end it would become an online playoff match. Obviously, casters were flown out to Santa Monica. I believe I know someone who may have done that. I can't remember his name quite yet.
Yeah, gotcha.
Scriv, that's it. That's his name. It was $30,000 in prizes. That was straight up cash, I believe, and also a mix of Omen affiliated products, keyboards, computers, etc. To make up for that. The qualifier started in April and it ended in November, which included the final endpoint coming over a 3-0 victory over London, and they were able to score themselves there. We then move on to Insomnia 62, which was also something I don't have down in my notes. It's actually the LAN. I don't know if you remember this, Yumi, where the owner of Radix was attacked with a hammer outside the venue or outside his hotel.
Yeah.
So that was Afro, owner of Radix, was unfortunately attacked outside there. Obviously, Radix had a very good team in UK CSGO at the time and up until, I believe, an event later in the year. Obviously, this is Insomnia 62. This is a £7,500 prize pool. The final 4 teams were Ferrari Peakers, CEX, London Lynx, and Wind and Rain. Wind and Rain eliminated CEX in the semis. Ferrari Peakers took out London Lynx, and the final was set between Wind and Rain and Ferrari Peakers. And I believe that was where the Ferrari Peakers name came from, because obviously you've seen it at a few events, a few ECA seasons or mixes or whatever now. But I'm pretty sure that's where it originated from.
Yeah, the name lives on. Everybody, I mean, I'm sure we'll see a mixed team named Ferrari Peakers in a year's time.
Sure, 100%. Wind and Rain, this is obviously when they still had their roster, were able to take the win. They secured £3,750 in prize money. And then in April, we saw some big news for the domestic talent. The top UK player himself, Smura, was able, I'm not going to do that again, was able to set the stage for his European careers. He made his way to Big Clan, obviously continues to play with that roster today.
Yeah, I think there were some questions about whether he might end up leaving the roster. Yeah. There were certainly some questionable tweets released at certain times. It certainly makes people speculate, right? We don't know what the situation is within that team. Obviously, the fact that he was able to attend these events and really just garner this cult following, where he's simultaneously the villain but also the biggest hope of the UK scene, is kind of it's awe inspiring a little.
Smear is certainly an opinion on some people that really puts it down the middle. You either hate him, with this Malk Sports drama, or you absolutely love him. I had the pleasure to meet him when he, I believe, actually came in at Epic 23. Came into the media room once, just said hello, nice to meet you and whatnot. And there were a few questionable tweets coming out of him, but you can understand. You got to remember, he's only a year older than me or something, which is weird to me. He's 19, around that, so he's still young. He's still got to form his opinion. He needed that time to play with the roster. It can be quite scary going into a core of 4 players that don't necessarily speak your language mainly as well. So certainly would be a daunting experience. However, he's managed to stick up to this point, and he's done a good job of that as well. He's shown people what he can do with that up, and he's shown what the UK scene can do. So good to him, and we hope to see more of Smee, obviously, in 2019. We now move on to the second Epic LAN of the year that took place in June, and this was the first Epic LAN you attended.
Yes, my first. It was my very first LAN ever, so it's it holds a special place in my heart already. And now the Epic LAN team are also in a special place in my heart. But
yeah, I mean, the Epic LAN team, there's no one more in the UK scene that has worked harder to get the general UK scene higher in standing in every game than the Epic LAN team. Dumpster, John, all the people that work with them, they've been doing this for who knows how many years now, and they've done such a fantastic job. They've worked their asses off, seriously, for that. I mean, they do such a fantastic job every year as well. Obviously, Epic LAN, something, again, I don't have in my notes, is obviously they're expanding into 2019. they have, I believe, going to set up a stage. They've got more tickets. Hopefully, going to be able to compete with Insomnia in terms of not necessarily prize pool, but possibly, standing and importance. Teams won't just go to Epic Land to mix it out anymore.
Yeah, and the fact that it's in a sports hall. If you've ever been in that sports hall and you've yelled, it's very echoey. I imagine with all the bodies, the PCs, all the carpeting, I'm sure they're going to put down. It won't make as much noise, but you'll definitely hear a yell from across the sports hall.
Yeah, it would be great to sit behind CGAY shouts. I can't repeat it, but
I know. Yeah,
you were there. Obviously, the final came down to Radix and CX. Radix, obviously, we talked about the owner earlier, managed to claim a 3-0 victory there. They were crowned Epic 24 champions. I don't think. No, I wasn't at Epic 24. It's my 18th birthday. Was during it.
Yeah, Radix was like a mix. It was Radix and friends, I believe. But
yeah, I think you're right. And then in my notes, Epic Land had a pretty good month in terms of events. I believe that Epic Land 24 was sold out in terms of CS:GO as well. Moving on to later into the month, we had Epic Land announcing their, as I put it, partnership with Grosvenor. The Grosvenor Casino brand, obviously everyone really knows about that now, but that fielded qualifiers from July to August, with the final event taking place in Coventry. Seemed like a well-run event, got the likes of James Banks to get involved in that again, something that has been well done by the likes of Gumster and John Winkle. In general, I hope to see more of Grosvenor in 2019.
Yeah, the fact that they're all LAN events is certainly a good thing. Granted, they're in their own premises, so that's a cost that's probably amended after the fact. But it's really, really good to see that more and more LAN events are popping up, and there's less of an excuse for teams to really just show up and play, especially since the entry fee was something like £10 a person. PCs provided everything.
Yeah.
If you didn't go to one of them, it's either you didn't have a team or you made an excuse, because there are so many and they were on weekends where people can make time. True. Or you're under 18. I had almost forgotten about that fact.
It is a casino, we have to remember, which is unfortunate. There was nothing you could do to get around that, but we understand. And it did leave a few players out. Obviously, the likes of Leaf, Murky wouldn't be able to attend, which is unfortunate. However, I will accept that to allow more LAN tournaments to come in. Hopefully in the future, maybe they're able to get more, maybe get part. It's a very tough situation. You can't really do much about it, but it's great to see Grosvenor get involved in esports and obviously support the Epic LAN brand. Mm-hmm. Now we move on to a different event, which was Insomnia 63. We saw in June the announcement of an increase in the prize pool, which people have been, at this time I remember talking about it, thinking it's a bit of a rip-off, really, how much they charge you, and considering how much they put into the prize pool as well, didn't seem like it was fair, considering the amount you have to pay for a ticket, if you're renting a PC, etc. However, that prize pool was increased to £30,000. Obviously, the last one was only 7,500.
Yeah, the huge cash injection scared teams off, as far as I was also aware. They had I think they had pretty low attendance in Insomnia in terms of teams that showed up, because they were afraid that European teams were just going to come over and steal the money. Not steal, but just win the money, right?
They just come up and steal the check. Yeah. I understood that. A few people were like, I don't want to pay however much to go to an Insomnia, only to have Team Unique, the Russian team that attended, just come in and just take me money from me and take me jobs. But it was a good thing overall. People can't complain that much, really, can they? This is what people wanted. It makes more sense to have a prize pool of this magnitude, even if it attracts European teams or players that you may not necessarily beat. I have absolutely no problem with this. I think it's a massive positive to have more money coming into esports. There's definitely more positives that came out of this than negatives. Obviously, we'll talk about Insomnia 63 itself. I believe you went to this LAN as well, Yumi, if I'm correct. You were at the LAN hall.
I-63?
Yes.
No, I was not. I am.
Were you I-62?
I've never been to an I-Series.
I thought. Okay, I'm a liar. Turns out I'm a liar. Yeah, so basically this then took place in August, 2 months after the increase in prize pool. It did attract a certain amount of European competition as expected. Obviously, Fnatic Academy, which at the time was um, with Eccles in the roster, and Team Unique, which was a Russian team, both attending. They both secured third and fourth as well, £2,500 for them, which certainly reimbursed any money they put into it. The final was Team Endpoint versus Business 5, which is the basically NeoM, Crucial, and Kirishima. I'm not sure if NeoM was coaching or playing. I can't remember. However, Crucial and Kirishima showed up for that event, so good to see them, obviously. And they well, it's actually Endpoint. I remember watching this and thinking, surely Endpoint can't win, but they do. £10,000 in the old bank for Endpoint as well, and that puts Insomnia past us. And now we move to the final event of the year, and that was Epic 25. Not actually that long ago now, only 2 months really at this point. Obviously, I'm sure it will be fresh in some people's memories. A few roster changes happened around that time, like we talked about earlier, obviously mentioning those. But again, it was a good event, a fun event for sure. A lot going on. Again, I believe sold out. And that was setting the stage, basically moving into 2019 for the expansion that would be coming out. It was Fierce, CX, and Ferrari Peakers, who were basically the three teams that we expected to get towards the grand final. CX not quite living up to the expectations that we had. Ferrari Peakers, they were sending kids to bed left, right, and center during that event. They didn't drop a single map the entire event as that mix. They then managed to beat Fierce in the Sunny Broadband Epic LAN event. I forgot to mention. Obviously, that was a good time that we all had plugging Sunny Broadband. But again, it's good to see sponsors getting involved in the likes of the CSGO tournament. We've had the likes of GTU and Mega before as well. Yeah, so basically it was Ferrari Peakers versus Fierce in that upper bracket final. Ferrari Peakers managed to take that 2-0. Obviously, then we moved on to consolidation final where CX were dispatched by Fierce, and the final was set. Ferrari Peaches taking on the Fierce in a 3-0 final that was pretty close. However, we saw a lot of errors in that Fierce roster at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. There's I don't know, their evolution as a team has certainly been a little bit interesting because outside of this year, they haven't really done too much to the UK circuit, I believe. I think when they were under Bulldog, they were kind of turning some heads. They were playing with some questionable players at the top, bridging the gap between the Royals roster and Fierce. Them being a kind of a new force to look out for in the UK scene has been pretty nice in terms of shaking things up, especially since they took it or they formed themselves at a time where CEX were making changes as well. So they kind of slotted in where CEX used to be or potentially could have been.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. Obviously, that does conclude the end of the year wrap up. And well, I mean, if you look at that list and really have a look at what we talked about, it's mostly positives this year, really, out of the UK scene. When I was going into my notes, I was having a bit of more a negative attitude in terms of where it feels like we're in the exact same place in terms of teams, etc. But we really have made more gains in support structure. We lost a few organizations, but the money, the support, and what is coming in really now is good for the UK scene.
Yeah, as far as organizations and tournaments go, there's certainly opportunities to make a name for yourself. And
yeah,
like especially teams or tournaments that are only UK based, increasing your stock in the UK is the first step to increasing your stock international.
It works exactly the same in every other scene, really. You set yourself as a domestic player, you then work your way up and you make sure that you can compete at that international level. And that's what we want to see more of, is in 2019, these teams compete at an international level. Hopefully the advanced season goes well for a lot of these players, for a lot of these teams, I should say, so that we can see Fierce, Revelation, or whoever in MDL. Obviously, now it's really just a waiting game. Obviously, again, we have to give a massive thank you to everyone who has been watching this past couple of months. Obviously, we'll be back in 2019, hopefully. I've got my fingers crossed, with some new stuff. Maybe get some people on the show, get some interviews going, get some opinions other than ours, just rambling on like old men about how there's no IGLs, there's no support structure, the scene sucks, everyone should give up. we're not that negative. But yeah, I mean, it's been an overall good year. It's certainly been a fun year for me in the UK scene. I'm
Yeah.
sure you feel the same year.
Yeah, I mean, my year has been an induction basically. Don't think most people would know who I am before this year, and there's still a lot of people that still don't know who I am, which is good. I'll see you guys later. I'll see you next year. You know,
It gives you something to work for.
yeah.
You're not all you're a superstar, but you're not an superstar yet. You mean that's the one.
Nah, I mean, this like the entire year has been great. I wasn't a huge fan of how Omen was run as a league, but I can't knock it for the opportunities that it's brought. Like I would probably wouldn't have gone out and gone to Epic Lands events if not for the casting challenge, and I wouldn't have even pursued this whole thing in the first place. And I, by proxy, would never have met you. So,
Wow.
yeah, I know. It's crazy how all that works out, right? Like
it really is. No, it's been an absolute pleasure to get Map Control done. Obviously, thank you to Fraser as well. He's been through it with us. Obviously, we met him at Epic Land as well. We know him personally as the Keyboard Destroyer.
I mean, my keyboard works. It still works.
The ex-gamer hater, as we call him.
I'm bringing my waterproof keyboard to LAN next time. So
good. Obviously, again, just a massive thank you to everyone who showed us support. We've had so many people messaging saying they want to come on, or they think this is such a good idea to get something like this done, and hopefully we keep improving into the next year as well. Obviously, hoping to get some improvements maybe in terms of graphics, or maybe I'll get myself a new webcam that doesn't suck, you know.
Or you know, well, the fact that it's been a learning curve for both of us, you know.
Exactly, yeah. Without Fraser, Yumi, it would have been just us screaming about how the audio is not right. How do we get the webcams to work? So, obviously, it is just been a massive learning curve for us all. But I mean, I couldn't be happier. Yeah, I couldn't be happier. So obviously, just a final thank you to everyone who's joined us. Obviously, hopefully, we'll see you next year. Well, that's goodbye from us this year. No, Merry Christmas.
No. What? I was gonna say, like, do your shout outs, do you like whatever, is there anything on your mind about the scene, people? Like, this is where you like go off the rails for like the next
another 20 minutes. Another 20 minutes. All right.
That way Fraser cannot go.
Okay, yeah. All right.
I don't mean it like that, but like, you know, if there's anything on your,
I'll give one thought. Please, everyone, just try. Just give it your all. Spend less time with your memes on Twitter, and
you can do anything.
You can do anything but seriously, we can be a good scene. It is going to take work from all of us. You know, the talent in the scene, the players themselves, obviously, who are the real talents, and everyone who's able to build up support structure. And this is the idea for Map Control in general, was to build up a support structure for UK scene. Maybe we will introduce more segments the next season to talk about young players or whatever. You know, we're up to all ideas. I'll give Yumi time to give his final thoughts now as well.
Yeah, there's many people LFT. Pick these people up, stick with them, get good. Thank you, Rory. Thank you, Fraser. Rory basically does everything on the show. I just turn up and talk. It's incredible, but hopefully I am more supportive, and this thing only continues to get better between the both of us because it's been a blast so far. That's my final note. Merry Christmas to everybody, and keep your friends close, keep your family close, and just play the game, get good, and maybe we can get somewhere together.
That was just like that was brilliant. That was absolutely, yeah. So we'll end here now. Otherwise, you're going to go for another 20 minutes. Merry Christmas, everyone, and a happy new year. We'll see you all next